What is going on, beautiful human beings? Welcome to the Ryan Magic Show. Today, and in this episode, I'm going to be sharing a lot of vulnerability by giving my personal encounter, experience, learnings around having relationship OCD, also known as relationship anxiety. And as someone that has always had a real disdain for labels, the idea of coming out publicly to share my experience of something that I feel is worthy of a label in my own personal life, in my relationship, the way that I show up in relationships feels very exposing. I noticed myself feeling like quite nervous before pressing record on this episode. So before I get in and start talking about relationship OCD, my experience, and what it's been like over the last almost 18 months, having this and sharing some of it, I just want to encourage you guys, if you haven't already, to reach out to me and make a connection point. I've been getting some beautiful messages recently. They really fill me up and bring me so much gratitude and love and appreciation when I receive a nice email or message. So Ryan@ryanmagic.com, email, please just shoot us an email. Say, hey, I'd love to hear if you listen to the podcast, if you get value from it, something that feels like a personal connection that you've had to anything I've shared, or if there's a particular podcast episode, a topic you'd like me to talk to, please share that with me, because I love responding to genuine inquiry. So if there's something that you'd like to hear about or know about in any area of your life, I will most likely do a podcast episode on it if you reach out and let me know that topic. So please hit me up via email or reach out on Instagram at the Ryan Magic. That always means a lot. And if you're looking to go further with me, just go to ryanmagic.com and you can check out the different services that I offer there. So let's dive into this episode. The reason that I'm feeling called to share on this topic, and I've been hesitant to do so for a long time, because I talk about personal growth in all areas of life and tend to share from my own personal experience as a coach and someone that has an online presence. But the reason that I haven't done this episode for a while is because I've kind of been in the thick of it, and I've been very, very discerning as to whether or not I want to share the personal life between myself and Shana online. And something that I have as a desire to do at some point when it feels like the right time is for us to share together on an episode what the experience has been like for her as well. But to be honest with you, we're still kind of navigating it pretty intensely. Like we don't have enough safety in the connection and the way that we feel and talk about the connection to even do an episode on it right now, joint. But I can definitely speak from my perspective, just what my experience has been like in this. And I've waited for a while to feel ready to do this episode. So anyway, before I kick off, I want to just give a little bit of an understanding of what relationship OCD is. The reason I want to do this whole episode is to share my personal experience, because it's been one of the most difficult and debilitating things that I've had to navigate in my entire life up until this point. I don't think many people talk about symptoms and experiences that are similar to what I'll share in this episode. And as a result, I felt, before opening up about it, very in the dark. And the interesting thing is that from my experience, what people portray that happens in their intimate relationship is very different to what actually happens in their relationship. What they discern to show is usually some glamorized version of reality. And you see that in the happy, smiling social media posts that people share. And what you don't often hear about as to what's going on behind closed doors, for me, that lack of transparency in other connections kind of left me feeling as though there was something, it kind of promoted more shame internally because I felt that what I was experiencing was so different. But the interesting thing is, when I've opened up to people, particularly men, about what my experience has been like going through relationship OCD and what some of the symptoms and what that actually looks like, to be honest with you, more than 50% of people share that they experience similar things in their relationship. So that kind of had me going, well, why has nobody ever shared that they've had a similar experience to me in this? And to be honest with you, even some of my closest friends, in the way that they would share and talk about their relationship was completely different to what the actual reality was. And some of those realizations recently caught me off guard, because I was like, well, if some of the people that are close to me aren't sharing a lot of and are therefore holding shame around a lot of the behavior that they have in their intimate relationship, what on earth would be going on with the average person? And so the intention behind this episode is to normalize some of the dysfunction that happens in relationships by sharing my own personal experience. And hopefully that allows you to take a bit of the pressure and steam off what you're feeling or experiencing and just bring some of this into the light. So what on earth is relationship OCD? Relationship OCD is a safety response, a patterned safety strategy or series of safety strategies that surface in a romantic relationship due to, and this is not really covered a lot in the theory of our OCD, but this is my a lot of what I share will be my experience, and a lot of what I share as well, I've done a lot of professional development in this, meaning like I've been seeing a therapist for probably close to 6 months now, if I had to guess, doing usually weekly sessions. I've read a lot of books on this topic and done a lot of research around it, and I've been living it for close to 18 months. So I've got a pretty solid, I'm pretty willing and open to leaning in to an area of my life that needs work. I'm usually pretty open and willing, but to be honest with you, nothing has caught me more off guard, been more confusing, overwhelming, and difficult to navigate as this. And it took me a long time to understand what was going on. So anyway, relationship OCD is essentially when someone has experienced some kind of intense trauma when it comes to the relationships that they've had with people that they should have been able to trust, having that trust intensely broken in some form, therefore creating a sense of hypervigilance when it comes to a healthy, intimate relationship out of the fear of getting hurt. And so what it looks like is just really intense safety strategies. The label in itself is just, I guess, supportive, because if you can identify and go, oh yeah, I suffer from those symptoms, there's solutions under that label that can be helpful, that go beyond just general relationship support. So what I'm going to talk about in this podcast episode is it's going to go a lot beyond relationship advice. I've read a crap ton of books on relationship advice. I feel confident and have done a lot of holding space for difficult relationship circumstances with people in a professional capacity. I've got a lot of knowledge and wisdom on masculine, feminine dynamics, communication dynamics, nonviolent communication. How do you attachment styles, trauma, general trauma, and how it impacts how people show up in connection, how to build trust in connection, just general relationship stuff. Done a lot of work with Alison Armstrong's, done a lot of David Dieter's work, done a lot of tantric sexuality work, done a lot of work with just relationship therapists, done a lot of work with relationship coaches before even opening up to relationship OCD. So relationship OCD was a whole other kettle of fish. And whenever I shared my experience of it, was like, yeah, this is what I've kind of been going through, and it's been difficult, and people go, yeah, relationships are hard, man. Very, very triggering for me, because it kind of, I felt a lot of my experience minimized by people not understanding the depth of difficulty and pain and hardship through this chapter. So anyway, relationship ROCD is when they're, like, I'll just say it for me. So I have a massive fear of getting hurt in relationships. I feel very safe in deep, intimate connection with someone that I'm not in a long, potential lifelong commitment and connection with. But the moment for me that it looks like or feels like or seems like I might end up sticking with someone for a long time because they have that level of safety and alignment and compatibility, all of a sudden, all of these extra symptoms emerge, and to attempt to move me away from the perceived threat of intense pain that could come from it not working out. So I'm going to read a few of I've got a book here. This book is probably the gold standard of just understanding the basic idea of what relationship OCD is, or relationship anxiety is. The book's called Relationship OCD, and the subheadline is A CBT-based guide to move beyond obsessive doubt, anxiety, and fear of commitment in romantic relationships, by a woman called Sheva Rajaei. So that's how I think you pronounce it. And it's a brilliant book. From all the therapy work and stuff that I've done, it's like fully aligned with everything that I've learned. So really, really phenomenal thing for anyone that really connects to what I'm sharing in this episode. I highly recommend reading this book. So these are just some symptoms of what it can look like. Because essentially relationship OCD is obsessive and compulsive disorder. And the kind of loop that happens for someone that has OCD, the way that it looks like is that there is some kind of intrusive or obsessive thought that comes in, and it is conjured up by the mind, this thought. So for me the thought is Shana the one? Is Shana the one? And that thought is a cocktail designed very specifically by the bartender of my mind to be the most intrusive thought that I could possibly have, an intrusive thought. So what happens is, as soon as that thought enters my mind, I start spiraling into massive rumination and massive anxiety. And so the cycle of OCD is intrusive thought causes massive anxiety, and then there's some kind of compulsion or obsession that happens as a way of creating temporary relief from the anxiety. And then because it's temporary relief and it doesn't address the core issue, then the intrusive thought just comes back and the anxiety gets bigger. And then the compulsion happens, which usually decreases someone's regulation, which actually creates very temporary relief. And then the intrusive thought comes back and the anxiety is even bigger because someone's nervous system capability is even less. And there's this cycle of spiraling down, but it all kind of links in with those symptoms of, there's an intrusive thought that's conjured up. Is Shana the one? And that's very intelligently designed by my intellect and by my mind, because my mind knows that I will bite on that question. And it's more of a meaningful question than anything else in my entire life. And my mind knows that. So it conjures it up as a way of distracting me away from the threat, right, of what it's attempting to keep me safe from and avoid, which is pain and intimacy, pain and commitment, pain and connection. Because I grew up in a very difficult household where there was trust betrayed by the people that I was meant to be able to rely on to keep me safe. That trust was betrayed from both my mother and my father numerous times in intense ways. And as a result, I'm very hypervigilant in intimate relationship. I don't feel safe, and I still haven't resolved this trauma. I still haven't alchemized these emotional imprints from my upbringing that say long-term relationship, super unsafe. And so what happens is the intrusive thought is cooked up to be designed for me, to throw me and distract me. And then it causes massive anxiety. That anxiety has me create distance from the threat. So I feel like Shana is the thing that I feel really scared of and around, and causes the trigger from my upbringing. Then there's massive anxiety, and then there's some compulsions. So my main compulsion is ruminating. I've got a few, but it's ruminating on whether Shana's the one. That's a big compulsion. Another compulsion that I have that is huge is a part of mine, a protective part comes up that I call the disgusted killer. And it comes online with massive judgment of Shana and the relationship, massive control of Shana and the relationship, and massive doubt of the relationship. And so all those parts come online. That disgusted killer, the manipulator, controller, the judger comes on board, and then focuses, obsesses on those parts, get into an obsessive compulsion. And then that creates some temporary distraction from the question, is Shana the one? And the anxiety, but then boom, it comes back even bigger. And so I kind of endured this for a solid, like, I'm going to say 10 to 11 months. Things were beautiful. I wasn't really looking for a long-term relationship. And then, as always, when I was least expecting it and detached from finding it, boom, I met someone who was actually a beautiful, healthy partner. And I had some intimate partners and was having some casual connection, some intimate casual connection. And then I met Shana, and it caught me off guard a little bit. And I was super excited about it. I was like, whoa, hang on a second. This woman is a massive catch, and kind of different to the sort of person that I'd usually had wanted to be with in the past, but seems so wholesome and healthy and open and willing and aligned and compatible. Whoa, this could go somewhere. And after about a month or so of being together is when I realized that. And the moment that I realized that, all of a sudden, all of this ROCD symptoms kicked in. I had no idea why I was feeling so anxious. I had no idea why it was kicking in so strong, why I was being so judgmental, why all these things were happening. But I knew that it wasn't as simple as, yeah, she's not the actual one. I could tell that there was a massive trauma response happening, but I didn't understand it. And it was so intrusive that it was so difficult to know what on earth was going on. So that was kind of my experience. But I'm going to read out from this book just what some different obsessions look like, some different compulsions, some different intrusive questions, just to give you a little bit of a snapshot into what ROCD essentially is. Because I believe a lot of people, it's not about getting labeled. It's just, can you relate to any of these symptoms? And what I talk about in this podcast will support you, even if you don't have as the same level of response as what I do, or the same level of fear and anxiety that I do. What I talk about from a solution perspective in this episode will still be helpful. So let's get into it. Some common partner-focused obsessions. My partner looks less attractive to me right now. Maybe we don't have sexual chemistry and we would be better off as friends. My partner isn't as ambitious or motivated as other men I've dated. Should I look for someone more career-orientated? She isn't my type. I'm usually into tall brunettes. Maybe that's why I'm not feeling certain about our relationship. They are quiet and reserved around my friends. What if everyone thinks my partner is boring and that I've settled, this is a big one for me, that I've settled for less than I deserve? What if everyone else thinks that? These are just an example of the way that the mind conjures up doubt to try to create distance from the perceived threat of the intimate relationship. Some other ones. I don't have butterflies when I look at my partner. Does this mean something's wrong with my relationship? My partner isn't paying the same amount of attention to me that they once were. Does this mean they're losing interest in our relationship and it's doomed? I can't get fully aroused when we're intimate. Does this mean that we're not sexually compatible? That couple we know seems so happy. They must have that in-love feeling and just know that they're right for one another. Why don't I feel this in my relationship? I don't find myself missing my partner as much as I did my ex. This must be proof that I'm just not that into it. Some more. some other compulsions. Checking to see if you are in love enough with your partner. Checking and comparing your relationship to others or to your past relationships. Seeking reassurance from friends and family members about the rightness of your partner or relationship. Searching online to find signs that your partner may or may not be the one. And by the way, I've done like all of these. Ruminating on the rightness of your feelings or the temperature of the relationship. Avoiding sex or intimacy for the fear of getting triggered. Avoiding committed statements or actions. So like progressing the relationship, moving in together, etc. Or your partner might say, you know, I'm so excited for, you know, where we can travel in the future together. And then you hear that and feel anxious because you're like, oh crap, what if he or she's not the one? Repeatedly asking your partner if they love you. Avoiding spending time with attractive people for fear that you will find them more appealing than your partner. So they're just some little symptoms, like broad symptoms of different people with relationship anxiety, what it kind of looks like or can feel like an experience. For me, and this is what I've mentioned to a lot of people that say they can relate to this, is my safety strategy that comes up, that controller essentially just finds something wrong with my partner, with Shana. That's what this safety strategy does. I'm just constantly, when I'm in this mode, all of a sudden I'm feeling anxious in my nervous system around my partner. It could be anxiety because of like things like I notice that I don't like what she's wearing. Or I notice that for some reason I'm not feeling physically attracted to her. And just to be clear, this is nothing to do with her. It is to do with not that our relationship is divinely orchestrated and magnetically attracted for both of our traumas that have brought us together. But the actual feelings or judgments or compulsions actually have nothing to do with truth. It's just subjectively conjured in my mind to create a obsessive distraction from the anxiety and to distract and cause me to create distance from the threat, which is long-term commitment and then potentially getting hurt, like I got hurt in my upbringing. But the way that it looks like for me is massive judgment. So the reason I call this part in therapy the disgusted killer is because I feel in my body this sense of repulsion, like get away from me, get this person away from me. They are not good looking. They like, I'll notice smells, like even if it's not, like my mind tricks me, literally will shape shift Shana. So sometimes I can be really attracted and sometimes I can be really unattracted to the same person who looks the same. So my mind literally shifts what I'm perceiving, the way that I'm seeing her, because it's attempting to create doubt. So I create distance so I don't get hurt. And so for me, it looks like massive judgment. I might judge what she's saying in front of other people. I might judge where she is in her career. I might judge what she wears, how she looks, what she says. And this is my main symptom. And then that just continues to feed that question, that intrusive thought that I have, is Shana the one? Is Shana the one? Oh, I just noticed she did this. Is she the one? I just saw other people that don't do that. Is that a sign that she's not the one? And it's this obsessive, intrusive, all-consuming, debilitating. Like I got to a point with this 9-10 months in where I was so exhausted and I was so beat down and my nervous system was so overwhelmed because these symptoms were so, like the only word that I can use that really gives it the accuracy of how I felt is debilitating. So debilitating that I reached out. I'd already been doing relationship coaching with an amazing relationship coach that just didn't have experience with ROCD at all. And it was that, and therefore I found the relationship coaching really difficult because there was a lack of understanding of what was going on underneath. And even this particular relationship coach didn't understand what I was going on and thought that some of my symptoms were weird. There was actually judgment over some of my symptoms, which was very, very difficult to swallow because then I already had a lot of shame around it. Just to be clear, like this has been one of the most difficult things for me to grasp, because all these safety strategies and reactions and judgments that come up as a safety strategy go so far against how I desire to show up in relationship. And so I'll feel a massive judgment for something Shana says, or like looking at her and feeling repulsed. And then I'll feel simultaneously deep shame for that. And so it's such a spiraling phenomena, because I feel like super scared, anxious. Then to try to protect that fear, the controller comes in. I feel really judgmental, but then I feel massively judgmental towards myself for having those judgments. So it's such a difficult situation with those triad of parts that would emerge each time. And then a fourth part that would always be there on the perimeter was just my achiever that comes online, the part of me that feels I need to be doing well and performing to feel good about who I am, that comes online when I'm dysregulated. All safety strategies come online for me when I'm dysregulated. And because this whole situation is so dysregulating, then my achiever's in the background going, you suck at relationship. What's wrong with you? And so those four parts were just having a anxiety party and just causing absolute suffering, like intense suffering. And so a big reason, like I was finding it hard my whole life difficult for this. And I'm really proud of myself for sticking at it, because I knew something underneath the surface was happening, and actually look at healing what's going on underneath. But my gosh, it was very, very difficult to stay at it when my entire life, like very difficult to be creating content online when I'm feeling anxious all the time. Very difficult to feel just a general sense of self-worth when I'm feeling deep shame all the time. So when I say all the time, I'm exaggerating subtly, but it's not too far off. Like there's a lot, very often, very frequent that this is happening. So very, very difficult, very, very difficult. But essentially that's what it looks like for me. And so it's very interesting, because for me, I noticed, and another reason that I went, there's something going on here that's more than meets the eye. My mind's telling me, look at Shana's doing this. Is this really the person you want to spend the rest of your life with? Is this person good enough for you? And just like these doubts and judgments. And I'm like, well, I'm showing up completely differently to how I show up when I'm in my heart. So I'm clearly not in my heart. I'm clearly in fear. And not only that, I never had symptoms this intense. And apparently relationship OCD kicks on quite more prominently when you actually enter a relationship that is healthier than previous ones. And the reason that kicks on is because there's part of the subconscious mind that knows, okay, cool, this is someone that's going to be more difficult to justify leaving. So like with Shana, for example, she's super open-minded. She's super willing to lean in. We can talk about things, discuss things, whereas in previous relationships, there wasn't that level of willingness and openness and safety. So it was easy for me to go, you know what, been trying for a few years now. It's clear that this person's not ready. Very easy then to escape the potential threat, because I was always at arm's length, because I wasn't with someone that was healthy enough. Whereas in this case, not to judge any of my ex-partners, because I also was less developed at that point. And all my ex-partners, I'm sure, will grow and develop throughout their lifetime. And some of them already have in amazing ways. But it's just that relationship OCD can kick on big time when you're actually with somebody that's a bit healthier and safer and has less of these less of these dysfunctions, less of a trauma bond, even though all bonds are necessarily on some level created so that you can experience growth and evolution and development together. all relationships on some level are kind of in that way trauma bonded. So it's not like this linear thing where it's like, you're in a trauma bond, but that other person, you're not. That's a healthy one. That's an unhealthy one. It's so much more complex than that. But yeah, when you can, for me, it actually feels more safe in a way to be in a relationship that's toxic, because that's where my emotional home sits from growing up and having unhealthy relationships modeled to me. It's almost like if things are going too well in a relationship for a while, my safety response is something's weird, something's wrong. I'm going to create challenge proactively because that's what feels more familiar and more safe for me. So relationship OCD kicks in hard, aka safety strategies come online when you feel the biggest threat of getting hurt and repeating the pain from childhood. And that often comes in when you're with someone that's actually super safe, because they're going to be they're going to stick around. They're going to be willing to work through things. They're going to be healthier, more open, willing, and able. And so that was definitely my experience. And it was interesting because I was in a casual relationship before I met Shana with a really amazing woman who was super into all the same things that I'm into, really sovereign, very self-aware, had done a lot of healing work, amazing woman, tantra teacher, an alternative doctor, like a general practitioner, but working with more alternative modalities as well. Just an incredible person. And we just had an awesome connection, really fun, really healthy, etc. But because she was in her mid-40s, for me, I just disqualified that she was an aligned fit for me, because I wanted to be with someone a little bit younger to have kids with as my long-term partner, or someone that I wanted to commit to for life. And so I kind of knew that the situation wasn't going to be a long-term thing. We kind of discussed that. There was no pressure of that. But then on one moment, after we'd been connecting for, I think, 6 weeks, there was like some real affection developing. There was a lot of depth, a lot of intimacy, but it was always with the knowing that we weren't going to stay together long term. And so I had zero relationship OCD symptoms coming up. But the moment I heard something from that woman that made my alarm bells go off, oh my gosh, I feel like maybe she is wanting it to be a forever thing. The moment that happened, I had a panic attack. That hasn't happened in previous relationships, because I'd always in the past been trying to find long-term partnerships. I've always been a relationship guy. I've just hopped from one to the next. Other than before Shana, I had 2-ish years where I intentionally spent time being single and did a lot of work on myself in that time to be comfortable with myself in my own company and not needing to find someone to complete me, so to speak. So when the moment that this connection seemed like it could go long term, I had a panic attack. And so then when I straightened things out, made it really clear that it wasn't going to be long term anymore, all the anxiety left. So I noticed that because the relationships that I've been entering have been healthier and healthier. That one that I had before Shana, that was more casually focused, was also really healthy. Also could have worked out. Like we could have worked through anything and discussed anything and could have made it work really if we wanted to. Other than the non-compatibility with the age difference. But yeah, I noticed that. And then I noticed that some of these symptoms of the judgment and the doubt, and even some for me of like breath, has always been like a way that I've created distance from partners. If I notice like the smell of their breath, even if it's not super bad or anything, just a subtle smell of someone's natural breath, I just go into like a freeze response and just don't want to go near them. And I noticed that, okay, that's coming up for me. This is not the first time that's happened. It's coming up again. And it's happened in previous relationships. The judgment and finding my partner attractive sometimes and non-attractive other times, same person, but not just, today I'm feeling a little bit more attracted. Sometimes feeling as though my partner is disgusting, and sometimes feeling as though they're super good looking. That's a very big shift. And so it's clearly something happening inside my perception as a means of creating safety that I saw as a repeating pattern. And so that's why I decided to go. And that's why I stuck at because my mind every day just finding a million reasons to doubt the relationship, to doubt the connection, to doubt Shana. And yet I knew that there was something underneath it, because I could just feel the intensity just being so much more than what the response ought to be in a situation like this. But because it was so all-consuming and intrusive, it was very, very difficult to know what on earth is going on. And I tried so many different things. I did so many healing sessions, coaching sessions. I saw a relationship coach for ages. I was courageous and I leaned in and I tried and I committed and I connected and I did so much stuff, and it didn't explain any of what was going on. And all the symptoms came back. And then the moment that I had a session with a recommended intimacy coach, and he went through all these things and said, do you find that you have this and this? And do you notice any of these symptoms? And I was like, yeah, all of them. He's like, that's relationship OCD. And I was like, oh, what's that? And he's like, well, it's a massive safety response that comes from a fear of getting hurt. I don't remember if he said that, but it was like, these are the symptoms. This is what happens, and there's a solution. And then I started seeing this particular coach / therapist / psychologist weekly, and it made a massive difference. So that's what relationship OCD is, and it just manifests in massive doubt, massive judgment, massive comparison to other relationships, and a lot of anxiety. Anxiety comes up for me with kissing. Anxiety comes up for me with touching, with intimacy, and it can shift. It's not always on, but a lot of the time, this is what comes up for me. I've got massive judgments that come in regularly. And it's like this feeling of, I just want to create distance from this. This is not safe. I got to get away. I got to do what I can. I got to find a judgment. I got to be in control. All my safety strategies kick off massively. And that loop that I spoke about, intrusive thought, is Shana the one? Massive anxiety gets created. And then there's compulsions, judgment, control, doubt, judging appearance. And then there's all these symptoms of creating distance. I don't want to do that. You're doing this wrong. Hey, I'm like, just give me some space. There's all these different things to try to create distance, to try to create temporary relief from the anxiety, which was crazily intense, like intense anxiety, not just like, I've experienced anxiety my whole life in different ways, but this is just been debilitating. Again, that's the way I would have to describe it. So attempting to create relief from that. And then spiral just keeps happening. It gets worse and worse and worse without intervention and without employing the two-pronged actual solution. One is causal in nature, addressing the fear of the ultimate root cause of the fear, like what's causing this whole response in general. That's like set of solutions one. And that's the one that I've done the least work on with the therapist. And so a lot of the symptoms and experience are still there because the cause hasn't been addressed. And I've wanted to do more of that work, but the therapist, we just haven't got to that yet. We've been doing more of the second group of solutions, which encompass how do you actually navigate behaviorally the situation of when you notice that you're having a response. And there's a whole set of solutions to that. So I just want to make that, I'm going to go through the kind of solutions for it. But first and foremost, just to take stock of what we've gone through so far, if you have noticed yourself struggling and doubting the relationship and comparing your relationship and never, like always doubting whether your relationship is good enough or your partner is good enough, if you notice that you've like always found reasons to try to want to leave or keep distance, you could say that's avoidant attachment style, or that's that's avoidant attachment style. That's kind of like normal in relationships to have that kind of dynamic. But the reality is that even if you're noticing some of the symptoms that I mentioned in smaller bite-sized chunks, there's still fears that are emerging there. There's still unprocessed emotion. There are still triggers. It's just going to be in a varying level of intensity. You might be listening to what I shared and thinking, I have similar, but it's way more intense than that. Chances, like most people with ROCD, when the actual symptoms come up, don't last very long in the relationship because it's debilitating, and they'll end up leaving, or their partner will end up leaving them because it's really challenging. And then they'll leave feeling kind of like, yeah, it wasn't right anyway. And then just go into another connection and similar things will come up. Then another connection and similar things will come up. And so I noticed, okay, cool, this is a pattern. I'm so developed in so many areas of my life, but this experience that I had as a child was so difficult and so challenging that the level of like safety that I experience in a relationship is very different. I feel safe on stage in front of 10,000 people. I feel safe in a massive conflict with 5 people that are screaming at me. I feel safe literally, and from a sexual perspective and an intimacy perspective, I feel safe being touching lots of different people at the same time at tantric events. Like I'm very experienced in ridiculously intimate ways of relating sexually, as long as it's not a lifelong partner. That's when all these symptoms come up for me. So it was really interesting with Shana because I've been practicing Tantra for a long time. And I was so excited to be with someone that would be open to that. And Shana was that. One of her checklist items was she wanted to call someone in that had experience with Tantra that could teach her. And then the moment we got together, she's like, well, let's do some stuff. And I literally couldn't do even the most basic things without going into a massive panic attack. It was like so disappointing and so embarrassing as well. And so just confusing. Confusing was like when I was so confused with all this stuff. So anyway, if you're noticing any of these symptoms that you can relate to any of these symptoms, then what I'm going to share in a moment will be very, very supportive. Okay. But the main thing I want you to know is you're not alone. Relationships are difficult. Yes. Even if you had healthy, even if you don't have relationship OCD or relationship anxiety, relationships are still really difficult. They just become extra difficult. And I notice that a lot of successful thought leaders, coaches, speakers, entrepreneurs become really successful because they're really insecure, and they're really insecure because they had a really tough upbringing. And as a result, their capacity to function and achieve in every area of their life is super high level, but the ultimate leveler of the playing field is emotional safety in connection and relationships. And so I noticed some of the highest functioning people in the world in this space that are so incredible at everything that they can put a solution to, that they can research and answer for. But when it comes to this, when it comes to relationships and intimacy and commitment and connection and conflict resolution, then they just never, they can never bridge the gap. And this was very tough for me as well. I had everything that I could possibly want and control in my life other than a healthy connection. But because I had such a big ego and such an inflated ego in every area of life, I had the approach to all my areas of life that I can control just didn't work in relationship. And so there was a huge cognitive dissonance. There's a huge gap between the functioning of every area of my life other than relationships. So because the ego had to be open and willing to be vulnerable at such a massive level of going, you're a 1 out of 10 in relationships, dude. A 1 out of 10. And you're a 9 out of 10 in health, 9 out of 10 in money, 9 out of 10 in business, 9 out of 10 in friendships, 9 out of 10 in all these other areas. But when it comes to intimate relationship, you're a 1 out of 10, bro. You are not healthy. You're manipulative. You're dysfunctional. You're arrogant. You have blind spots. You suppress all this stuff. And even though you're a 9 out of 10 in communication skills, even though you're a 9 out of 10 in relationship theory, you're a 1 out of 10 in practice. And I notice so much so, and this might sound like a bit of a judgment, but it's just what I notice. It's with men and women in this space that are really powerful, in control, successful, able to control so many areas of their life. Then when it comes to intimate relationships, it's just like, why can't I meet my guy? And it's just, men just can't meet me where I'm at. I just don't find women that are high quality enough. And it's an outsourcing of responsibility because the ego is not confident enough and doesn't feel safe enough to admit the vulnerability of the size difference in competency with relationships and other areas of life, because relationships are so different. They bring up all the emotional wounding. And for someone that has a superiority complex, a strong ego that needs to be there for safety from a difficult level of toxic shame and upbringing or whatnot, for that person to then be able to be open to working on it and doing the real honest work and being vulnerable with it can be so difficult because it's such a gap compared to every other area of life. So anyway, moving forward, if you experience any of this stuff, I hope that this podcast will inspire you to feel comfortable. You're okay, but maybe there is some work to be done. So I'm going to talk first about the practical behavioral prong of the two-pronged solution to this stuff. And again, to be really honest, I'm in the thick of this. I experience anxiety every day in my relationship still. I'm way better at dealing with it now because I actually understand what's going on. So the awareness is super supportive, but because the emotional trauma is so heavy, my reactivity is big and I don't notice a lot of the time. Like it takes me a while to catch myself, even though I have so much awareness. Emotionally, I get hijacked. And so I don't even realize that I've been triggered. So anyway, behaviorally, the whole solution is being able to realize that the anxiety, if you just sit in it for a little while longer, the situation's not as unsafe as what your body perceives it to be. So intrusive question, anxiety comes up, compulsion comes in. I'm going to judge. I'm going to run. I'm going to argue. I'm going to start looking online. Is she the one? And how do you know? Signs that this is your soulmate. I'm going to start just fantasizing. That could be a compulsion. Fantasizing about the sort of partner you want to be with. Could just be like feeling and ruminating on all the things that you don't like about your partner, all the things that you want from somebody else and fantasizing about being with somebody else. It could be looking at other people's Instagram profiles. It could be watching porn, more common for men than women. Any of these kind of symptoms, you notice when they come in as a way of trying to exit the anxiety, one of the key solutions is to, with awareness, intervene and realize that the anxiety hits this point, this heightened point where you want to escape and do some kind of compulsion to give yourself the relief from the anxiety. But because the perception is, if this anxiety keeps rising at this level of speed, if it keeps increasing with the level of intensity and speed that it's increasing now, I'm going to die. I can't handle this. But the illusion is that it's going to continue to go up. Whereas if you just sit with it for a tiny bit longer, it reaches a peak and then kind of starts to plateau and slowly decrease. And so one of the big solutions is noticing the feeling and the urge to respond. And as annoyingly simple as what this is, it's way harder in practice than it sounds in terms of simplicity in theory. But it is knowing, it's called it's choosing a value aligned, choosing to do something that you don't feel like doing, that your body's saying don't do. Your body's saying this is wrong, this is bad, this is going to stop. We got to compulse, we got to obsess about something, we've got to do something to create relief here. But then you being able to, with awareness, know that that's not actually true, and then choose to do what you don't feel like doing anyway. So it's essentially just like doing what feels uncomfortable is one of the really big prescribed solutions for this. You feel it, and then you just do something else anyway. So you feel like you just want to get away from your partner and you just feeling all these judgmental thoughts. But something I might do is then just put my hand on my heart and just, I feel like this might sound intense, but I feel like this person's a massive threat and they're disgusting and get away. And I just want to push them away. But I might just say, I love you and give them a hug. It feels like the hardest thing to do ever in the whole world that I've ever had to do. It takes a lot of courage, but it then starts to teach my brain, my nervous system, oh, you did the thing that felt impossible, but it wasn't actually. It actually wasn't as unsafe as I was perceiving it. So I'm going to start to loosen my grip and change my association to that experience, because I've been demonstrated that if I do actually lean in and have some intimacy or have a hug or say something kind or say a committed thing, that it's okay. Like nothing's going to happen that's bad, and it creates that association. A really big aspect of the solution with this what's called safety response of relationship anxiety is understanding this in relationship OCD theory. It's called motto, MOTO. Motto stands for myth of the one. Myth of the one. It's this fantasized, infatuated idea that gets projected onto us through social media and movies of relationships that are unrealistic, essentially. We all have this. We all have this imprinted into us, injected into us from what we're exposed to. We see these like Hollywood romances and in the movies, but also with celebrities, and like, oh my gosh, if only my life was like that. Oh my gosh, he's so handsome, and oh my gosh, she's so good looking, and oh my gosh, he's so rich and she's so famous, and they've got this, oh, this is just like the movies. This is a honeymoon fantasy. This is a happily ever after fantasy. And we're given this myth of the one. When I find this situation, this person, my life's going to be better, which is not true. Someone else doesn't have the capacity to create an experience for you long-term, sustainably, that's better than what you can experience without that person. Someone else, it's impossible, because your experiential reality is based on your internal map. Someone else comes in and it's just what you perceive about that person. And this is why relationships, just objectively outside relationship anxiety, have dysfunction and are difficult, is because we have this myth of the one in society. We have this fantasized idea. And so what that causes is we're perceiving that someone exists that has more benefits than drawbacks. We perceive that someone exists that's like really good and they've got lots of upsides, but they don't really have any downsides. So then when we see it, because we're looking for it, our perceptive awareness is focused on, oh my gosh, there's the tick, 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 tick. This could be the person. And then there's this infatuation. And so our mind is hyper-focused, because in every moment we have 11 million bits of information coming into our awareness in our subconscious mind, but our conscious mind can only hold 40 bits. So those 40 bits that our mind actually holds in our conscious mind are filtered based on our subconscious programming. So if we have 11 million bits, the 40 we're choosing to see are subjective to based on what we choose to see. And so if we're in this like myth and idea of the one, motto, myth of the one, and we're looking for this like fantasy person, we're going to see the bits of information that will fit into those 40 bits to have us sculpt. Yes, that's the one that we're looking for. I noticed I was playing a game the other day with my sister, playing Catan. If anyone's played Settlers of Catan, it's a pretty fun game. It's like Monopoly on steroids. And you roll a dice, and what you roll determines what's favorable. If you can roll it on your turn, and what you roll impacts everyone in the game. And she was hoping a certain thing. She was hoping 10 got rolled. And so 11 got rolled, but her brain was looking for 10. And she said, yes, 10. And then she picked up the resources that she would have got if a 10 was rolled. And I was like, that's an 11. That's an 11, not a 10. She's like, oh, damn. Because her mind was looking for 10, it saw 10. 11 was there, but it filtered 10. It saw 10. And so same thing happens for us when we're looking for a partner. We're hoping to find Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, Mr. Perfect, Mrs. Perfect. We're trying to find the one, that mythological creature that exists. And so we're looking for them. And when we're hyper-focused on the 40 bits of information, we've kind of tossed away the other 100 bits of information about this person that make them an equally beneficial partner. Like you could be with someone that's like really like romantic and sporadic, and you're like, wow, this is so awesome. They're spontaneous. You zoned in on those parts of them that you really like. But then there's that, with that sporadicness means that there's less groundedness, and you feel kind of like, can this person just relax? And so right from the start, that's been the thing. The sporadic nature can be, it's cool because you get these fun, unique, random variety experiences, but then you are going to lack some kind of stability and just wish that the person would settle down sometimes. It's not that they're bad because that other information exists. It's just that they're just love. They're equal. There's equal benefits and drawbacks. And so you could go, well, it's just about finding the one that's aligned for me. Well, there are so many areas of their life. It's not that you could be with anyone. Like there's going to be a certain level of compatibility, but there are going to be things that you like and dislike about every single person. Not just every single person you're with, just every single person in general. If you spend enough time with someone, anyone, your sibling, your parent, your friend, like I've got lots of friends and that I just love and just feel like they're the best people ever. But when I live with them for a little bit, all of a sudden, you know, this fantasy I have about them and the way that we connect on the topics we connect in, they dissolve a bit. You know, I like my best friend perceives me in a certain way, but he doesn't see what it's like to actually be with me. He doesn't know what it's like because I'm not just manipulating, controlling, judging, doubting loudly in public. I bring all that stuff in private where I feel safe enough for that part to come out. So I don't feel like a bloody psychopath. I don't feel like an absolute idiot, which is how I can judge myself with it. So he doesn't know these parts of me. He perceives me in a light that's better than what I actually am. Okay. Some fuel for the throat there. Been motor mouthing for like over an hour. Hey, let's keep going. So we will, like this idea of this myth of the one, this fantasy, it will collapse with anyone that you're with. But what happens with relationship OCD is we're so hyper-focused on what we want and at the start, and then that flips. And so we can fantasize about there's this other mythical creature out there that's not my current partner, that's someone that has more benefits and drawbacks. Because I feel unsafe here, my mind's tricking me about this mythical creature out there. It doesn't mean that your relationship is guaranteed 100% the right one for life. But if your partner is open, if your partner is willing, if your partner has some like general overlapping in values to you, and they're generally like, I know this sounds, I don't really super love this language, but if they're like a healthy, good person that's well-meaning, it's probably not about the person, and it's probably not about the relationship. It's probably your fears that have been manufactured from your upbringing, from your nervous system, your trauma, but also from what society kind of injects into us with this myth of the one, this idea. And like I said at the start of this video, I'm doing a video right now. You can watch this on YouTube because I do video episodes for every podcast episode. But in this podcast at the start, I was speaking about the fact that, what was I speaking about? Yeah, the reason I want to do this is because most people don't share the truth of what happens in their relationships. And it happens so often. People are just talking about how amazing their relationship are, and they're showing all these kissing each other photos and stuff. And then they break up a month later. You're like, what the heck happened there? It's happened so many times with people that I know. Like it's happened with me over the last 18 months where we had this couple we were friends with that were just like all over each other and talking about how easy their relationship is. And when you find the right person, it's so easy. And then gets to a point where they actually broke up. We're still together. They broke up. And I was feeling so like my ROCD was using this relationship to be like, oh my gosh, they're saying it's easy. And when you find the right person, it's meant to be easy. And my mind was like taking, like, gullible to all this information because it's so vulnerable with the fear and the anxiety underneath, that it's like, oh my gosh, why is my relationship not easy? Why do they have this? Why does she have this? Why does that relationship have this? Why does this guy have this in his partnership? And that blocks the capacity to see the gratitude for what does exist. Because when we're in a fear response, our mind is just those 40 bits of information. We're hyper-focused on the threat. We're hyper-focused on what could go wrong. We're hyper-focused on what could cause pain. And so the ROCD and relationship anxiety hyper focuses on things that are going to cause distance from you from the relationship. And so that is one component that's really important to understand. Another huge aspect to behaviorally address relationship OCD is called diffusion techniques. And the attempt is to create space from the hypnotic kind of energy that happens, the just being completely swept away by the thoughts and the feelings and the anxiety and the intrusive thoughts and the obsessions and just get swept away in it all because it's so all-consuming. Diffusion techniques create awareness, essentially. And so one big and the simplest and biggest diffusion technique is just naming out loud or in your head that you notice you're having an experience, but not necessarily believing it to be true. So for example, I might be judging Shana, and instead of believing that and then just like fueling that question, is Shana the one? I might say, I noticed that I'm having the thought that Shana could be more disciplined. I noticed that I'm having that thought. And by saying I notice that I'm having the thought, it creates separation from me and the thought. And I'm not being the thought. I'm not believing it, attached to it, in it. I'm just creating some distance from it. I notice that I'm having the thought. My mind's having that thought. Is Shana the one? But I also know that I have a safety strategy that's pronounced that has me trying to create distance from relationships because I'm deep down terrified of them. So that puts me back in the driver's seat and gets relationship OCD out of the driver's seat. Another diffusion strategy is if you notice you're having the feeling, I notice that I'm having the feeling of being afraid of Shana, but she's not actually a monster. Like I'm not actually in any danger. I just notice I'm having that feeling. So instead of then just feeling that kind of disconnect, that repulsion, that kind of like the desire to push away, I'm able to name the feeling, the sensations, and that diffuses me from being tied into that experience, tied into the thoughts, tied into the feelings. And then I can step back in the driver's seat. That's another big solution. Is basic. I notice I'm having the feeling. I notice that I'm having the thought. That there are lots of different diffusion strategies. Can't remember the guy's name. It's Stephen someone, who is the founder of acceptance and commitment therapy, has some really great TED Talks and online keynotes through YouTube, where he talks about lots of innovative diffusion strategies that he uses. Some are funny. It's like the thought comes in and you like sing the thought. So it might be like noticing that Shana, my relationship could be more like this person. So then in my head, I'd be like, my relationship could be like this person, yo. And then like I'm saying that, and then it's like, I don't do that one very often, just to be clear. That's just an example. Then it's making that thought less intoxicating. So it's creating distance from it. I'm not, again, it's putting me back in the driver's seat because it's taking away the stickiness of that thought. It's not believing it's not sucking me in. So that's a really big one. There's other ways where you can like say it in different voices to try to diffuse from those thoughts. One of my one that I feel like is really powerful at shifting the experience behaviorally in the moment. Because I don't think this is the ultimate solution. I don't think this behavioral arm of the solution is necessarily enough in itself, but it is supportive and it is helpful. Definitely is. But the causal element and the root cause is really important. I'm going to talk about that next. So another one that's solid is like treating the intrusive thoughts, compulsions, rumination as a bully. Because the way that you disarm a bully is by kind of going along and saying that you believe. It's like in that scene at the end of 8 Mile where he does that rap where he spends the first half of it dissing himself. Like, I know all the things that make me, all my kind of drawbacks and weaknesses and flaws. I'm some white trash dude. And he just trashes himself. And then then he trashes the other guy, and then he flips it over to him. And then the other guy doesn't know what to say because all his raps that he was going to do to battle Eminem in this 8 Mile movie were about him, and he just took it all out of himself. So the guy's like, well, what do I say now? It's the same thing with a bully. If a bully's like, you're such a loser, and then you said, I know I'm not. He's like, yes, you are. You're such a loser. Look at you. Look at what you're wearing. He's like, my clothes are cool. And it's like, you're just egging him on. But if you were to say to the bully, yeah, I'm not a loser. I'm the worst loser of all time. I'm an ugly, fat, dumb idiot. You're so right, man. Thanks for that, dude. And then you just walk off. The guy's going to be so confused. You just like go with it and just like magnify it and exaggerate it. So for these thoughts, like one of the big solutions is the intrusive thoughts. You kind of go with it and magnify it like you would do for that. Kind of seems like counterintuitive, or it could have some toxicity in it, but because you're taking the piss out of it, it's creating diffusion. It's diffusing yourself from the thoughts. So let's say I had a thought, Shana could wear other clothes, better clothes or something like this, which is not true. It's not true. Just to be clear, these judgments and stuff are made up things. There's nothing wrong with what Shana wears. She dresses organically, beautifully. It's not that, but it's definitely the feeling that I have, and it definitely comes up. So if that thought came up using the bully strategy, I could say something along the lines of, oh, you're so right. She's just like the worst dresser in the whole world. I should dump her straight away. Yeah, thanks so much, but I'm not going to. And it's like, oh, damn, he's not under the illusion anymore. He's like being able to put himself above that. And then it takes all the steam out of the relationship OCD or the safety strategies attempt at having me bite. I've just done the opposite of it. It's like takes all the ammunition away. It's like, yeah, you're right. She dresses terribly. Just it's a terrible situation. Oh, well, not going to do anything about it. Oh, well. And it's just that, oh, well. And then it's like, oh, he knows that and is not biting on it. Damn, my strategy didn't work. Damn, he's not going to create distance from her. Damn, right? So it's a temporary situational behavioral solution. But the biggest temporary situational behavioral solution is being aware of the situation, knowing that it's not true and that it's a safety strategy, and then choosing to lean in and do what you would have done anyway. The problem with the thing that's solid about that is you're very slowly, and I've noticed this a bit, like the way that I show up with awareness over relationship OCD and actually knowing now, okay, does it feel aligned to be here right now in the relationship? Yeah, it does. You know, do I know for certain that I want to spend the rest of my life with Shana? No, it doesn't. Do I need to know? No, I don't. Do I still have this cloud of overwhelm? Yeah, I do. But I know that it's a solution to try to create distance from the situation. I know that there's massive trauma that's present here, and that's what's motivating the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations. I know now. I'm not just intoxicated by the thoughts, feelings, and sensations. I'm well aware that there's something under the surface happening. And as a result, I can not let it affect me as much and not buy into it. I buy into it a lot because it's very intoxicating and because the causal healing is still yet to be alchemized. The emotional imprints, the traumas, the pain, the wounding from my upbringing is unresolved right now. I've done a lot of work on it, but it runs deep for me. It runs deep for me in lots of different facets. So I'm not expecting to have it sorted straight away. And I've taken this idea away, of this expectation away, that it should be some Hollywood romance. It should be perfect. I ain't there right now, and I ain't going to be overnight. And I'm okay with that because I know long term I will be. And for me, that's the needed response. It might trigger someone else because they don't feel okay with that. I've told some friends that and they're like, oh, what? Sounds like you're settling. Not that intensely, but sounds to me like that's not actually the solution. And it's like, it is the solution for me. It's not the overall, it's not going to address the core solution, the causal resistance, but it is what's needed right now. And so being able to go, cool, I understand it's ROCD. It's coming up symptomatically. This is what I'm noticing. I create a little bit of disconnect from it, a little bit of diffusion, a little bit of space between me and the trigger so I'm not swept up in it. And then even though my body is feeling like it wants to do one thing, I have the courage to lean in and do something differently because I am the master of my reality. I'm not allowing my triggers to be the master of me. I choose consciously my behavior. I don't let it be unconsciously chosen from something else. So that's that. So that's not all of it, but it just gives you a little bit of a snapshot at how it can be navigated situationally. Let's talk about the second element of it, which is it needs to be addressed. And I don't know, I've only been in this for 18 or so months. So longer than that, but I've only been aware of it I've only been attempting to solve this for 18 months. So who knows? Maybe if you do the situational things for like 5 years, your body just reaches a point where it's like, oh, well, like clearly there's no danger here. I'm just going to not produce a trauma response anymore. But for me, based on the level of volatility and intensity, and yeah, it doesn't seem as though that would be enough to solve the problem because it runs deep and it's intense. So to address the actual root cause, it must happen, and I'm in the process of doing this. And I'll update you guys over the journey. I just wanted to do this live now, this podcast now, because I've got enough information that hopefully it could support some people at various stages of your journey, or people that you know's journey, or hopefully this will inspire you to talk more openly about the relationship stuff that goes on with other friends openly around everyone, and know with you and your partner that, hey, it's normal to have conflict. It's normal, which I know you're probably aware of, but it's normal to have these things coming up. You don't have to feel ashamed of it. You can have those things coming up and not worry about other people's judgments and still choose to be together and still choose to work on things. And you can choose to leave if you want. You're probably going to have the same things come up in a new relationship, but if that's what feels aligned for you, you can do that as well. But just to create less judgment and less shame and more normalization of this. So hopefully you communicate it about this more with friends. Anyway, emotional alchemy is, in my perspective and what I've heard, the solution. And that could be done in various different ways. I've kind of working on it through internal family systems and parts work to allow what are known as exiled parts, fragmented, emotionally traumatized aspects of my childhood that are buried deep within me with the emotions still stuck to them, still in that same frozen time reality from when I was 5 years old, 3 years old, 6 years old, 9 years old, 12 years old. These parts that don't yet feel safe enough to come to the surface, to be felt and held and trusted and safe. I believe that I'm still learning to feel safe in my own body. I'm still learning to feel safe to be alone. I like removing myself from the attachment of having other people make my life better. I'm still in that process of learning to feel safe in myself. I intellectually know a lot. I've been doing this work for a long time. I've emotionally done this work for a long time, but there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Done a lot of different, I have my own healing modalities that I've created, but there is a lot to do. And with healing, the healing work, the alchemy work, the emotional integration work, the key to the whole thing is safety. Your safety, you have to feel safe. And so for these exiled parts to come to the surface, these exiled parts, this emotional pain that's yet to be brought to the surface, to be felt, it needs to feel and know that it is safe enough and that you can hold that experience. And you can't just teleport yourself there. You need to go on the journey and lean in courageously with vulnerability and openness to the best of your capability for where you are now, and feel what you got to feel. Be with what you be with. Not force or rush or desperately surge forward because you've got to heal it all so you can finally meet your partner, so you can finally feel enough. That is all rooted in fear. That's all rooted in insecurity. That's all chasing and grasping, and will not cause the actual, that will not causally fix the situation. And so what needs to happen is trusting the process and the journey of your emotional healing. Could be a 15-year journey, could be a 3-year journey, could be a 7-year journey. It really doesn't matter, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't experience fulfillment in your life now. You can't have your best quality experience now, because you're never going to be perfect. But you will continually, as you learn to feel safer with different levels of emotional pain, have deeper emotional wounds come to the surface to heal. And so that's one aspect of it. That's a way to look at the causal healing journey as fragmented parts to come to the surface. But there's lots of different perspectives on how this healing looks. Some people think that must be somatic, where you need to move around and shake and it needs to exit your body. Maybe there's vibration that needs to happen in your throat chakra, so you're making all this noise and it comes out that way. Maybe some people think it has to happen with tears, and that water holds memory, and memory can be emotional imprints, and that only if you cry, sweat, or bleed will you let trauma out. Some people believe that. Some people believe you just do emotional release work, where it's just like Donkey Kong smashing a pillow, or doing a temper tantrum in a pillow, or doing some clench and holding for anxiety and fear. Some people think that you need to run. That's the way that you're going to get through it. Some people think it's only going to come through shaking. Other people think it's only going to come by sitting in the pain without trying to change it. Some people think that it can only happen through plant medicine. Some people think that it can only happen through stillness. My perception is that what I know for certain is that it's only going to happen with compassion, whatever the vehicle is. And because I'm doing so much of this work, and I have been over the last 3 or 4 years, over the next 2 or 3 years, I'm going to have a lot more experience and a lot more insight on this. But I believe that, and have experienced that, what happens is, if emotional release isn't met with love and the shame or judgment of the emotions that arise, then the emotion recycles, meaning it doesn't get resolved, it doesn't exit, because it never felt safe, because there was judgment present. So even if you feel it, it can be felt in like a shamey, blamey way, and the emotions, the imprint doesn't get resolved. It sticks. So there needs to be enough self-love, enough non-judgment, and aka enough compassion for the emotion to actually feel safe. Because not only is it an energetic, because emotion is energy in motion. Not only is the emotion, that stuck energy, needing to move, it's not just about moving the energy, but the causal healing is also about developing as a mature adult, the behavioral flexibility, the emotional maturity, the leadership capability for your nervous system to feel safe, your nervous system to know that it can hold certain experiences. So it's not just about You are who you are, and then the emotion comes up and out. It's about developing who you are so that you become more emotionally mature and more of a leader and more of a healthy adult, so that your inner child and emotion and nervous system feel safe knowing that who you are is someone that can navigate the world in a way that creates safety for you in different social dynamics, in different relationship dynamics. So I really do believe that compassion is a really big part of the healing journey. And I believe that being able to, like, this is what it looks like to not do that. It's trying to get rid of it, trying to change it, not being okay with what is. If there's an attempt to shift, to change, and it's like reactive, like if there's and I want you to be honest with yourself about this, but if you notice as you're listening to this, that there's a part of you that's just trying to get the answers so you can fix you, so you can finally get what you want, that's just giving us the feedback and giving you the feedback that there's more self-love to be cultivated. There's an opportunity to love yourself deeper, where you can love yourself being imperfect, so that your inner child, because think about it, if you characterize all your trauma into an inner child, and you had an actual physical manifestation of your inner child as a real child in the room with you right now, and you only were going to be fully loving of that child that's really in the room with you right now that you can see and look at, you only were going to love them to the degree to which they were healed. Like, let's say that the child that's in the rooms, parents just went through a divorce and they're crying all the time, crying every day. And you're like, well, I'm not going to love you yet until you've gotten rid of all that emotion. I'm only going to love you fully when you're healed from that, because right now you're not actually fully healed. That is nonsense. That would never be a reality. Because if that child was in the room, your inner humanity would kick in and want that child to feel loved fully for where they were now. Don't cry. Well, not. See, that's what I just said there is a symptom of society. And I take that back. It's like, I'm here. You're safe. I love you. All of you is welcome. That's what way better language than don't cry. Jeez. But that's true. That's probably part of my unresolved aspect of what I'm talking about right now. Don't cry. Don't cry. Probably imprinted, or else I wouldn't have said it. So it's about unconditionally loving, being that leader for yourself and developing that fortitude internally to create safety and unconditional love of who you are imperfectly right now. Imperfectly. Not just releasing the emotional charge, not just alchemizing the internal resistance, not just letting it go energetically like an impala in the Serengeti that got pushed down by a lion. The lion gets distracted by something, and then the impala gets up, runs away, and shakes it off. So the emotions, the trauma, the fear that's stuck in the body is now shaken out. It's not just that. It's about you feeling capable and emotionally developed and matured as a person. And that takes time. That takes repetition. That takes consistency. So what I'm really working on at the moment, and what I have been working on recently a lot, is literally sitting completely still in my emotions consistently. I notice a charge comes up with Shana in my relationship or in any area of my life. Instead of reaching for the phone, the addictive tendencies, the short-term gratification, distracting myself, I literally just put everything down. I sit down, I close my eyes, and I be with the discomfort consistently and unconditionally, non-judgmentally being with myself, to teach my inner child, you're safe here in this. I'm here. You feel uncomfortable and you want to reach for a phone? Don't worry about that. I got you. I got you. I'm here with you. And I'm always going to be here with you. And I'm going to keep coming back here with you. I'm going to prove it through my actions that you can trust me. I'm going to prove it with my actions that you're safe because I've got you. Actions, consistency, sitting with yourself. So there are some of the factors that are needed for causal alchemy. I'm still in the process of it. This is the biggest trauma, the biggest stuff I've ever had to work. I've worked through a fair few things in my life, but there's nothing that's felt this difficult. It's probably because I can hold more now. So the universe has given me a really big challenge, and it is really, really challenging. It's the hardest thing ever. So if you can relate to any of these symptoms with the relationship OCD work, I recommend reading that book that I mentioned just to get some insight on that. But to be honest with you, from the support which has been really amazing from my therapist. I've got extensive background in lots of emotional healing work, but it still wasn't enough, because what wasn't implied there was my own way of creating safety for myself through sitting with and working on the causal symptoms, the causal emotions, emotional charges, emotional pain, wounding, and trauma. And so that to me is really formative and builds a lot of internal trust, which therefore creates safety in situations. And I'm noticing some shifts. I'm still in the experience. So as I do this work for longer, I'll report back and update you guys. But that's the extent. Like I would recommend reading this book, and I would recommend starting to sit with the discomfort and starting to build consistent trust with yourself. I would also recommend not judging, not buying into the stories as much, and just settling into what's present and just being more accepting and loving for what is going on right now for you, and discussing this more openly and honestly with your partner first and foremost, and then secondarily with friends and people that you trust, that are close to you, because you will find that other people go through similar things. I'm not saying that you have a ROCD and lots of people have ROCD. I kind of feel like from chatting to people that a lot of people have the symptoms of it. Doesn't really matter, but a lot of people have the symptoms of it. A lot of people are going through a lot of relationship dysfunction, and barely anyone's talking openly about it. People talk about little things. Yeah, it's hard here and there. But people don't talk about the real activities that they hold the most shame around to the people that are even close to them. And if you're not talking about the things you have the most shame around, chances are other people aren't either. And so you might say, yeah, getting some arguments and stuff. And then the person that you're with is thinking, I judge the crap out of my partner and I doubt the relationship. And I've called my partner names at some point. So I feel really ashamed about that. And they're thinking this other person probably never does that. It's just a me thing. But then if that person had the courage and vulnerability to voice that, then this person that's listening will be like, oh my gosh, that person does that. I feel safe to talk about these things that I've done now. And it's not to make the behaviors celebrated, but it's having compassion for the attempts at creating safety in an environment that feels unsafe. Because I know from my experience in doing this work with people over a long period of time, no one that I've experienced has genuine bad intent in a relationship. Everyone's doing the best they can and wants to be the best partner they can and wants to treat their partner the best, and is just doing the best that they possibly can. And I know that'll be true for you. So anyway, I'm going to bring this episode to a close now. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to do more work with me, you can go to my website, ryanmagic.com. Check out, I do one-to-one coaching. I love my one-to-one coaching. I usually focus on every area of life, but generally work with entrepreneurs and coaches. And I also run the Art of Courage workshop, which is a whole modality and approach to life that allows for the extraction of the greatest fulfillment and an antidote to fear. So that is one of my favorite things to teach and do. I would love to have you attend the workshop. You can find out more about it at ryanmagic.com. And please, if anything I said resonated, I would love to hear your experience. Send me an email, ryan@ryanmagic.com, or go to the Ryan Magic on Instagram and just send me a message. I'll keep it confidential. And I would love to hear any experiences, or I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to connect. So sending all the love in the world. If there's anyone that you think would benefit from this episode, please share it out there. And I'll see you guys on the next episode. So much love. Over and out. And peace.